I'm Felina Jean, and this is Black Broads Abroad. I'm an international woman of leisure who said peace out to the United States in 2011, and I have not looked back, accepted this ass, honey. Since then, I've lived on 4 continents with travel to over 40 countries. Along my journey, I've come to know some very compelling Black women from all over the world who also said fuck you to their comfort zones. I created this podcast to inspire Black women in the diaspora to take risks and live their very best lives.
Meryanne Loum-Martin lives in Marrakech, Morocco, where she owns and operates a boutique hotel called Jnane Tamsna for almost 20 years. The hotel is nestled on 8 acres and has 24 rooms, 5 swimming pools, and a clay surface tennis court. As a hotelier, Mrs. Loum-Martin's clientele has included the likes of movie stars Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise and designers Giorgio Armani and Donna. She's the only Black female hotel owner in Morocco. Born in Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire, to a West Indian mother and Senegalese father, Meryanne spent her childhood, adolescence, and professional life in Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, London, Moscow, London, and New York before settling in Paris for law studies. She was admitted to the Paris bar as a lawyer, winning the Prix des Secrétaires de la Conférence award. Meryanne comes from an esteemed family and is a 4th-generation lawyer. Welcome, Meryanne.
Hello, welcome. But as a woman, I will add 4th generation on my mother's side because they are lawyers, and 2nd generation on my father's side.
That's amazing. I'm glad you made that clarification. Yeah. So, I mean, I just read your bio, and you have such an illustrious background as a global citizen, attorney, interior designer, and hotelier. But I'd like to just take it back to your childhood to contextualize your life experiences. So you were born in Abidjan. What were your early years like being reared as a third culture kid, so to speak?
Well, it was very different because, everything was very different. I think I have, anybody who's my age has lived like in 4 centuries, I would say. So I was born in Ivory Coast. So both my parents were lawyers. My mother passed, my father is still here. And my father had decided to establish his law after meeting my mother in Paris Law School, in La Sorbonne. He decided to start his law firm in Abidjan, in Ivory Coast. And I was born there, but we left, I was 4, and it has never been a big part of my life. We left when the African countries became independent. Because my father was from Senegal, and he was called by the Senegalese government to ask if he would join the Foreign Affairs because he had studied law and had a doctorate in political science in Paris. And he was also called by the Ivory Coast government because he had spent many years there. And he had the choice between the 2, but he chose to work for Senegal. And for 10 years, he was in the Foreign Affairs, and he later became the ambassador in Ghana under the very charismatic Nkrumah, and then in Moscow, and then in London. And that's why we traveled for about 10 years. And then he decided to go back to his law career, and he started, instead of going back to West Africa, he started his law firm in Paris, where he still is at 97.
Wow, that is so compelling. So we just spoke about, you've lived in Russia, in 3 African countries, including Ivory Coast, Ghana, and now Morocco. Lived in London, Paris, New York.
New York, I was an adult, and I went there to work for 2 years, not as a child. Yeah.
Oh, okay. But just having been immersed in such vibrant and distinct cultures, how have those experiences shaped your personal identity as a Black woman, but also your professional identity?
Well, there's 2 things. I come from a very powerful, very strong personalities family on my mother's side. I'll tell you a bit more about it. And out of all the places I've lived, I have to say that it is Moscow which has shaped my identity the most. I was a child. We lived in Moscow. I was there from the age of 7 until the age of 10. And it was under very strong communist era. And I had my mother, who was an absolutely brilliant woman, would wake me up every morning and say, open your eyes, open your ears, and remember everything. So, I was like a child, quite mature for my age, because even when we moved to Moscow, I was 7, but we had already traveled quite a bit, out for pleasure, not for work, for pleasure. So I was very open and curious. And this is where I really lived between various cultures, because we are under strict communist era, and everyone was spied, even though we were not Americans or French, we were just Senegalese. My father was the first ambassador there, but everything was tapped, and we were spied on everything we were doing. And my mother was obsessed with the idea that I would make the most out of this experience. So my life was, I learned Russian, and she managed that I didn't live too much in the diplomatic bubble, because everything was controlled. You were not allowed, for example, on Sunday, if my father took the car and we were driving out of the city, if you didn't ask for a specific authorization to leave further than 40 kilometers, suddenly from behind the trees, there would be people arriving in cars and telling you where is your authorization, everything was always observed and spied on. So what happened then is that, so I'm the oldest of the 3 children, and my mother so the Russian kids go to school in the morning, and they used to be free around 2. So she had organized in our place that there would be like a little classroom. And I don't know how she organized it. Some kids from the neighborhood could come in the afternoon. So I had my little classroom only with Russian kids in the afternoon. And we would do things and play, and I spoke Russian, and so I was a bit immersed in a kind of Russian children of my age. I was in the morning in the French diplomatic school, and I was living with my parents, who were also, living a different culture. And then when we would go to France, because my mother, my grandparents were living in Paris, Paris is home, I would discover the freedom. So, imagine a child who grows at really important years, understanding that culture is not a given, that some people live under total censorship. You are not allowed to do anything. And so my mother also had registered me in a youth communist center. So the Russian kids, they would be part of a cultural house from their neighborhood on the weekend, and this is where they would go and learn how to develop films or how to play music, and we all had a uniform. And everywhere I was of course the only Black child, and so I had the Soviet youth uniform, a little brown outfit with a red little scarf, a little hat, and then a brooch with Marx, Engels, and Lenin. And so for 3 years, I was living between all these worlds, and when we would go to France, everything is free. I can go to the cinema with my grandparents. We can buy chocolate. We can do whatever we want. Then I'm back in Moscow between these extremely controlled world of young Russian kids and my own childhood as a diplomat child. And I think this was the things which made me the most who I am, because I learned that you cannot take things for granted. and that you have to fight. And I'll just give you a little example before we move on to something else. I was learning piano, and my piano teacher was this absolutely flamboyant, red hair, funny woman that my mother became very good friend with. And you know, when you were in Russia, you were not allowed to listen. A Russian person could not listen to Beatles music, Rolling Stone music.
Wow.
No, because that was not communist. So you could only listen to classical music or to Cuban music, because Cuba.
Cuban.
Yeah,
communist as well. Yeah.
Okay. So, and the Russian people, I mean, salsa is not really their culture, right? So, so when we would arrive to my piano class, there would be salsa music blasting out of her open windows all over the neighborhood. And then my mother would take me to her apartment, and the two of them would start laughing. And after a while, I asked my mother, why do you always laugh with the piano teacher? And she told me, well, because she's not listening to Cuban music. She's listening to Puerto Rican music. And the communists cannot see the difference. This is why we are laughing so much. And this is how I understood, you know, what it is to be fighting for freedom. It's little things like that. It was her way to do cultural resistance, you know, to trick. They couldn't see the difference. And I remember, so as a child, the only thing we could do was to go to the opera and to the ballet. So I saw more nutcrackers than one person can see in a whole lifetime. And my mother would also drag me to the opera, which was not always easy for a child. But, and then we would have big bands from Cuba come. And it was like Orchestra Aragon and things like that. And I remember, you know, that we would go and all these communist Russian people would just sit on their chair as if they were listening to classical music, where we were all bouncing on our chairs, you know. And and so let's say that I grew up in living in the middle of extreme difference of freedom and of culture, and this has totally structured my personality.
Wow. Your mother seems like a rather compelling woman. And I mentioned your bio, she's also West Indian. What country is your mother from? Is it a Francophone country as well?
Yeah, so my mother was from Guadeloupe.
Okay.
But she didn't live there so much. But the whole family is very much under the influence of our history, because so my mother's great-grandfather was born enslaved, and he was freed at the age of 16, and he stayed working on the property where he was born. And now he had a salary, and he was saving every penny. And one day, the owner of the property told him that he was going to sell, but that he had been so happy with his work as managing the manager of the estate, that he was going to recommend him to the next buyer. And my ancestor asked him, how much you want for the estate? And the guy told him a price, and he went and brought the wood box where he had saved all his coins. Wow. And they counted together, and he arrived exactly to the amount of the estate.
Oh, how divine.
So he bought that land, and he moved into the big house. And he was obsessed with the idea of learning how to read and write. But, you know, enslaved people were not allowed to go to school, so he didn't know. And when slavery was abolished, I know that you're a little bit Haitian, so you were the leaders of that. But when it was abolished in the rest of the countries which had slavery, the rich white stayed rich, but the middle class and lower class white became poor because they didn't have free labor anymore. So there was this poor, formerly middle class, now poor white guy, knocking at the gates of the property every day, and begging for food. So after a while, my ancestor told him, okay, you move in, I'll feed you, and you're going to teach me how to read and write. And so the white guy moved in the former slave quarters, and my ancestor was living in a big house. And then he got married, and his first son in one generation became a lawyer and was elected to the French Congress. So
one generation.
In one generation. So my great-grandfather was sitting in Paris at the Congress and writing the laws of France with all of these old white Frenchmen. And he became a friend of W.E.B. Du Bois, and they organized together the first Pan-African convention in 1919. And he was a lawyer, so he was sharing his time between going back to his constituency, where he was a lawyer, and coming back to Paris, where, you know, they were congressmen. And his life was totally extraordinary. The life of his brother was also quite extraordinary. And the life of his children were amazing. And the oldest of his children was my grandmother, and then he had boys. So the legacy, and I don't have time to tell you everything about what happened to them, but the legacy of the history of the family is very, very strong in my mind. And, you know, I woke up learning about the death of George Ginsburg. And and it is something that resonates in a way which would not resonate I'm not American, I'm married to an American, my kids are French and American, but I've always been extremely interested in American politics, maybe because I'm coming down from enslaved people, and there's a lot of, you know, things which are in common between the West Indian mentality of former plantation civilization and things happening in the US. But so here we are.
That's amazing. I mean, your life story and the stories of, you know, the pedigree in which you've come from. This is like a screenplay.
No, I know. But you see, the thing is that I think that for many generations, we have been in places where people did not expect Black people to be. You see, for example, my grandmother at the age of 25, she had the front cover of the French newspapers because she had spoken in Parliament, and she had asked something very specific, which she obtained. And that in 1924, when she was 25 exactly, this young Black woman would plead her case in front of 630 French white male congressmen and win was something unheard of. And she was all over the press. So, you know, it's true that this legacy gives you, let's say, a certain strength, I would say.
Absolutely. Wow. That's just amazing. Epic memory is a real thing in terms of, you know, DNA having memory. Yes. So just to fast forward just a bit, you know, many years ago, you took your French bar exam 5 years after completing law school, and you admittedly remarked that you experienced some trepidation competing against younger students fresh out of law school, and you took a very unique approach to preparing for your legal exams. Can you elaborate a bit more about the aha moment that you experienced pertaining to your approach and how that ties into valuing your deep multicultural roots?
Yes, well, that's a very interesting question. So imagine I come from this family of lawyers. On both my father, everyone is a lawyer. My godfather, I adored my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, who was also a lawyer. And I always wanted to be an architect. I didn't want to be a lawyer. I thought that I didn't need to be a lawyer because there were already so many in the family, and that the values were in me anyhow. And my parents were very cool. You do what you want, you know. And so I finished high school 2 years in advance, and I went straight to architecture school at the École Nationale des Beaux-Arts in Paris. And everything was going extremely well. Imagine, since I was a child, I wanted to be an architect.
Wow.
I was obsessed with that. When teenagers had subscriptions to, rock magazines or whatever, I had subscriptions to architecture magazines since I was 13. So
Wow.
What happened is that I couldn't get into third year because in this stupid, rigid French education system, and I'll say why I think it's stupid and rigid, you needed to take math credits. And it makes no sense because when you're an architect, you have engineers doing all the math calculation. And what would be important should be humanities and creativity. So everything, I had good grades everywhere except math and physics, which were minor credits you needed to go into third year. So I had to stop. And I went into a year of depression because I said, I know that I'm here to build. This is what I'm supposed to do in life. And now how am I going to do it? So I took different classes. I learned another language. I traveled a bit. And then I said, okay, I need a degree, so I'll go to law school. I went to law school. So imagine we are 4 years after I have finished high school. I could have finished college by then. So I go to law school and I avoided taking all the classes which leads to the bar exam because I was not interested in becoming a lawyer. But I wanted to have a degree and okay, I'll have a law degree. So I avoided everything because I wasn't interested. And I took classes I liked and I had a licence, which is BA, I had a master's. And then I started looking for a job. But because I was influenced, by the English system and the English mentality and even American mentality, where you can have studied something, but you do another job because what they want is the proof that you know how to think. And then if you know how to think, you know how to learn and you can be going through a training program, right? So unfortunately, with my law degree, everywhere I would apply, they would put me in a legal department, which I thought was deadly. So I moved to New York and I worked there in different fields for 2 years. And then I came back to France. And so now I have left high school about 10 years ago. And I'm looking for a job. And the same thing, I can't find a job. So I started working for my father's firm, and I discovered that it was very interesting to be a lawyer, and that maybe I could be a good one. So it was quite annoying because I thought it's too late to take the bar exam now. And I was on the street in Paris, it was like June, and I bump into a very old friend of mine. And he tells me, oh, I didn't know you had come back from the US. What are you waiting to take the bar exam? And I told him, look, I was in law school a long time ago. I didn't take any of the classes you need. And anyhow, I'm sure that all the applications are closed. And he said, no, there's one university where you can go until tomorrow and go and register immediately. So I went and suddenly I had applied and I'm supposed to take the bar exam. It was in June, so 3 months later. Not even 2.5. And for a few days, I didn't realize what I had got myself into. And suddenly I realized there's no way I'm going to miss this exam, but there's no way I can catch up. Years and years of, learning the proper subjects. And there's no way I can compete with kids who were dreaming of becoming lawyers, the same way I was dreaming of becoming an architect. And they took all the steps to get there when I didn't take even one. So this is where you need to be creative. And I said, okay, this is a challenge. There's no way I'm going to miss this, flunk this exam. How can I be at the level in 2 months? So by miracle, I had just read the review of a fantastic book on the philosophy of law.
Ooh.
So I went to a bookstore and I bought everything which had to do with how to think in a legal way, how to analyze, and the philosophy of law and the history of the philosophy of law. And then I became unbeatable on this. And I knew just a little bit of what were the real subjects, but just a little bit. And it was like playing poker, which I don't play. But I decided that my only chance to make it was because it's written. It's not like in the US where you have to cross things, It's not a multiple choice thing. In France, it's essays. You have to write essays. So I said to myself, my only chance is that the reader, the professors who are going to read, see it as a very unique piece of work. And it has to attract their attention. Because there's no way I can compete with someone who knows everything by heart for 4 years. And this bet played brilliantly, had an incredible grade. And then it allows you to go to the oral exam, where I took exactly the same bet to take this, to open the subject, which is imposed to you by some sentence showing that you really understand the subject, and then taking it to a direction where there will be no competition. And I did very well with my bar exam.
Wow.
And that's
an amazing story.
And then I said, okay, now I'm going to learn what I need to learn to be a good lawyer. So then I learned what I needed to learn. But when I took the exam, what I really proved to myself is what is important is how you think and not what you know by heart.
That's a fact. I mean, I was an educator for almost 15 years, and rote memorization is not indicative of intelligence.
Exactly. And it is too bad because you see, in France, they're so rigid with the education. In England, in the city, I mean, the most brilliant people in finance, when you ask them where they studied philosophy, they studied history, and none of them had gone to business school. None. Never.
Wow.
But in France, all the people in banks have gone to business schools. The one leading corporations have gone to business school, and it is not good. And I remember the brother of my grandmother, who was a surgeon and who also had an amazing, I mean, his life was a James Bond life. He always told me, that he studied Greek and Latin, like my father did, Greek and Latin, and then went on to study medicine, and that he believed that the humanities were the most important thing to be mixed with science. And now in France, it's only about science, and the new generations of doctors, they need to be good in math, which makes no sense to me,
That's a very salient point. I'm a liberal arts brat. My first degree was actually in the humanities. You had a career pivot, obviously, from attorney to hospitality entrepreneur. How did you come to transition from law to creating and revisioning riads in Marrakech and turning them into a wildly successful hospitality business?
So, it's what happened. So I'm a young lawyer in Paris, and there's this once you're admitted to the bar exam, there's 1 year of an other school where you're really taught how to be a lawyer. So I was in that school, and there's a very prestigious competition in the French bar called les secrétaires de la Conférence, they choose 12 out of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lawyers. And when I was in the school of young lawyers, there were lawyers who were part of this it's like a very elite society within the bar. They created a fake contest within the school, and I don't know why someone told me, oh, you should take it. And I did this. It was just like a mock exam, if you want. And one of the lawyers told me, you have to get into the competition as soon as you're sworn in. And I said, well, usually it's about 2 or 3 years after you're sworn in. He said, no, you have to do it immediately. So when I finished the school, I'm sworn in, I'm a lawyer, and I took this competition. There's 2 competitions, the price of the secretaries and then becoming a secretary yourself. I took this competition and I won this prize of the secretaries. And so I was representing Paris Bar in international debate competition with other, Canadian bar or Belgian bar. So I was on the track to have a very good career because all of the lawyers who are going through this kind of elite stuff usually have very distinctive, legal careers. And everything was going well, and I was working on very interesting pro bono cases also. And when my parents, but inside me, I knew that I needed to build, I needed to design, So I said, okay, maybe I made a mistake and I should have been a lawyer like everybody in this family. It's going fine. But, sometimes you feel that there's something which is missing in your life. Mm-hmm. And I was not fulfilling this need of being creative. And so my parents started saying that they wanted to have a house abroad, no further than 3 hours flight from Paris. And this was a Sunday lunch conversation. And one day I told them, look, if you're serious about this project, I want to be in charge because, as you know, I always wanted to be an architect. So everybody says that Morocco is great. We didn't know Morocco. And out of Morocco, Marrakech has the most discerning and the people, people with a lot of taste, like Yves Saint Laurent was very famous about his connection with Marrakech. So I told my parents, look, I know one person who goes to Marrakech a lot, and if he can open doors for me, I want to go and look for land. So we are in December 85. I came to scout, and I fell in love with Marrakech from the moment I set foot on the tarmac. And wow. I found a piece of land. I went back to Paris, came back with my parents. They fell in love with Marrakech. They bought this land, and I started designing a house for them. And while I was designing it and building it, I had the understanding that there was a huge gap here. So we're in the late 80s, and Marrakech is a fascinating culture. It's an inspiring place. I'm so happy I'm living here. And then in the 80s, you didn't have the accommodations you have today. It was only big hotels like Convention, anonymous, quite dreary style, You had one hotel which was expensive, called Mamounia, which is absolutely gorgeous. But if you couldn't afford to go there, it was a very disappointing trip for everybody who did not know someone who could open doors. So I made a little marketing study, and then I told my parents, it doesn't make sense to have a holiday house where you go from time to time. Why don't we create a business? You buy the land next to it, and we create something bigger, and we'll try to launch a concept where the real lifestyle of Marrakech is for rent. So wow. the lifestyle I know behind the door. So my friend was from the very first circle of Yves Saint Laurent. And I had met him when I was working in New York because we were working in the same bank. And we became extremely close. And he opened the doors of the most gorgeous houses of Marrakech. And then I understood why people were in love with this city. And I also saw the difference with the tourists who were staying in these horrible hotels, visiting the markets, visiting a few cultural sites, and leaving and never coming back because they would say, okay, I've seen it. And the return rate when I came first was something like 0.05% of the tourists.
Really?
Oh yeah, no one would come back. There was nothing to do, apart from seeing the things you had already seen. And because of this different type of accommodation, now the return rate is gigantic, So what happened is that in 1989, I opened these properties where people could rent a house on an exclusive basis or both houses. And it immediately had big coverage in the design press, stories in Architectural Digest. I had the front cover of a magazine called Côté Sud, which was like the referenced magazine in Europe then. And I had 16 pages inside and the front cover. And and so the people started hearing about this place that you could have for yourself. And then this is how we started having very famous people. Brad Pitt came to my first place and he told Tom Cruise to come. And we were so busy that Tom Cruise had to try 4 times before we could find space for him. And then we started having all the European royals and also people who were not famous, but who only wanted this ultimate lifestyle with absolute privacy. And that's how it happened, by coincidence. I analyzed, well, there's something missing here, because how come the experience I have is not available for other people just because they don't know the same people I knew? So I decided to create the experience for rent, and internet did not exist then, but it really went viral. And my mother would call me exasperated, asking me, when can I go on holidays in my own house? And, and I would look at the book, nothing. I didn't even have a computer. And I would tell her, look, I think I have 3 nights for you in 6 months, but you have to arrive that day and leave that day because we're full. And so I continued to be a lawyer, and on my, in the evening, it was fax time, I would receive piles of faxes from, all over the world. Is the house available? Then. And so I had this dual job, and I was married, and I had my first child. And I had this very busy time until the moment that the property was in so many magazines that I had to stop. I had to stop the bar, because in France, you're not allowed to have 2 jobs if you're a lawyer. You can only teach or write. No, that is a French thing again. You can only teach or write if you're a lawyer, because anything else they see as conflict of interest. And a friend of mine was a model and a lawyer, a dear friend of mine who just lost her mother a few months ago. The mother was Olivia de Havilland, the actress, and she died at 104. So,
wow.
Yeah, and so I was with my friend in February. She came, my friend. She came to visit me in Marrakech, and we had this wonderful evening. And she was telling me, my mother is going to be 104 in a few days. And so she had her birthday, and then she passed a few weeks afterwards. So Olivia is American and was married to a French man, and my friend grew up, we've been friends since we were 13. And she was a lawyer before me, because she didn't go to architecture school before. And she was modeling, and she was a lawyer. And the lawyer recognized her on a highway where she was doing, she was on a billboard, doing an advertising for Avis, the rental car.
Oh, sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he recognized her and he denounced her to the legal ethic board. And she was called and they told her you have to choose between the, this modeling thing and being a prestigious lawyer. So she said, okay, bye-bye. And of course, I knew what had happened to her. And I thought, if ever they understand that all this press is connected to me, because I was always making sure that my full name wasn't in any article, then I'm going to be called and I'm going to be in trouble. So I resigned from the bar and I dedicated my time to developing Marrakech. So we were still in Paris then. And I was developing Marrakech from Paris. And later we moved to Morocco in 96. And then I took on more projects on site. But this is one thing led to another,
Wow. This is so many amazing stories. I'm going to have like a sidebar conversation with you about writing your screenplay.
Of course. Well, I mean, if you're into screenplay writing, let's speak, because there's at least 6 members of my family who could have a film on them,
Oh, we will definitely have to have a conversation offline. So your hotel, I went to Marrakech, I think it was 2012. And I wish that I would have known of you then, because it is such a magical city. I would have loved to be on your property in person, but just the pictures, your hotel is so well appointed. The design aesthetic is jaw-droppingly beautiful. How have your travels and immersion in so many unique cultural environments informed your aesthetic?
Oh, I think it's just like totally, spontaneously obvious that I have a multicultural background in everything I do. So the hotel has 24 bedrooms. When people say, oh, why do you have 5 pools? It's because there's 5 buildings and each building, it's like villas spread on the estate. Each building has its own pool in case people want to rent a house to themselves. What happened is that if reincarnation exists, I was Indian in another life. I love India. I feel at home in India. And if I had not traveled in India before coming to Morocco, I think Marrakech would never have happened for me. Because when I came here for the first time in 85, it reminded me of northern India. And India was too far to have a house there. But Morocco, I said, well, it will be my little India next to Europe. So we have several bedrooms which are Indian inspired. We have a lot of, all the rooms are a mix, just like myself. I'm a mix of various origin. So you have a little bit of Art Deco, which is like a strong influence in Morocco. That you have a lot of Morocco in an edited way, in the shapes, in the archways, in the perspectives. You have some of West Africa through handwoven textile or some drawings, some art. And you have a sense of British countryside also. So it's all the things which are part of me: Morocco, India, Senegal, and Europe. And it doesn't look like a hotel. It looks like a lived-in property.
It looks like a home. Yeah.
Yes,
it looks like a very well-appointed home.
Yeah. And the most important thing in my life right now is that I published my first book. Which
Congratulations!
Thank you. It's I'm full of gratitude that Rizzoli, the prestigious publishing house, signed me up for this first book, and it's now out. It's called Inside Marrakech: Enchanting Homes and Gardens, and it is taking people to private homes they would never see. And it is. Yesterday, I was interviewed by House and Garden South Africa. And when I was explaining, of course you live in South Africa, and I'm going to be in the November issue. And so when I was explaining what my book was about, the journalist said, oh, in fact, you wrote a love letter to Marrakech. And I said, oh, I never saw it like this, but this is exactly it. Because my book is about how this place is a constant source of inspiration for foreign creative minds. So you go through the houses of, British people, American, Indian, Belgian, Italian, French. And everybody has brought their own cultural heritage and blended it with a very strong sense of a Moroccan house. So all the houses are totally different, but they're all very much Marrakech, So it's a celebration of this incredible creative place.
Wow, I can't wait to come back to Marrakech.
Yeah, I'll take you to places you don't know.
Oh, I would love that. I mean, it was sensory overload for me.
Yeah.
I had that's probably one of the best shopping experiences I've ever had in my life.
In 1989, just out of chronological coincidence, I was the first one to create a human-sized experience in Marrakech. And this is why this is why CNN said everything started in Marrakech because of this woman when they introduced me in their story. It's because of this. Imagine I had, there was not one month where you would not open 2 or 3 magazines when there was a big story. Germany, Australia. I had a friend one day who called me in Hong Kong and he said, I can't imagine even here there's a story about your place, And so it was all over, because it was so new it was not about a villa rental. It was about renting a lifestyle. And out of this experience, people say it's the exact origin of all the riads. And there's 1,800 now. 1,800 riads. Yeah. So I'm very happy that I didn't think it would have such an influence, but I know that it has totally changed the tourism structure of the country, because then there are a few riads in Fez and in other cities also. So you feel like coming back because you experienced this. Imagine if you had stayed in a 300-bedroom kind of Sheraton or Marriott. Would you feel like coming back? Probably not.
Probably not. Yeah,
Exactly.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have so many offerings at your accommodation. It's like, it seems like an experiential opportunity. There's cooking classes and calligraphy for children, magic classes for children, sidecar tours.
Yeah.
I love that you have so many robust offerings. So you don't have just the typical tourist experiences.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are some of the challenges that you've had to overcome as an international business owner, competing in what I'm assuming is male and perhaps white dominated spaces as a Black woman? And how did you sidestep those challenges?
Well, the white-Black thing, I was the only Black person everywhere since I was born. So it was not new. In my school, and I was also, I was never bullied as a child. And I was, in France, you have this thing that they elect the head of the class. Doesn't mean that you have the best grades. Usually it's a good student, but there's always a head of a class, and who negotiates with the teachers, with the parents, So for 4 years, because each time I thought, I don't like this school, I go to another one. For 4 years, my last 4 years of senior high school, I changed school every year. And we had this bet with my mother. She was telling me, so you're changing school again. So I bet, because 2 weeks after going to school, there's the election. She said, I bet you're going to be elected the head of the class again. And I would always say, Mama, I don't know anybody in this school. They're going to elect someone who's been there forever. And I was always elected the head of class. So it means that no one was ever bullying me, and that I was also preventing anybody from being bullied. So I grew up with this sense of, that's the way it is. That's the way it is for us Black women. We have to be stronger, and we don't take no for an answer, and no BS. And if we have to scream louder than the white guys, we're going to do it. And, so it was never like, oh, I was shy, I was going to hesitate. No, I just go ahead. But it is true that it has been, when I think about it, and that I have like my lawyer's career, I had a red carpet waiting for me, and I left things to come to a country where I didn't speak the language. It wasn't my country. There is racism, like in many places. I was a woman, and I was working in a field which has to do with building, which is the most macho trade anyhow, right. Whether you're white or Chinese or African. When I think about it later, I understand why people thought I was crazy. But I made it happen, so I guess I wasn't that crazy. And I'm going to continue doing new projects, and the craziness continues. So in terms of I think hurdles, I think it is your own perception of the hurdle which creates it as a hurdle. If you don't see it as a hurdle, you just see it as that's going to be a bit more complicated than I saw, but I just have to jump over this and turn it into an opportunity. But, it is constant, the people like when my husband is American, okay? He's Caucasian. And his last name is Martin, which is Martin in French. And Martin is just like Smith or Jones. It's the name which you have the most in France. Martin, he's not Martin. I'm married, I'm Mrs. Martin. When he moved to France and we got married, we decided that he should have also a French passport. So every time we would go in the administration, I'm here, the Black woman with a white male, and the name is Martin, and people would always think that I'm the immigrant trying to get the French citizenship, and they would just ignore me and look at him and speak to him. And he speaks perfect French now, but then he did not. And he would look at me and say, what do they say? And I would speak with quite authority and sometimes a little bit of aggressiveness to the people sitting behind the desk. I said, you know what? I am the French one, and I am the one giving him the French citizenship. So you speak to me, please. And, it was in all positions. And then my son is born and people think I'm the nanny,
Oh, and, gosh. Yeah, I've had that experience as well.
That. So we live with it, and we just, heads up, you're the one making the mistake, get out of my way. That's the only position that you can have,
So what's the biggest lesson that you have learned about operating outside of your comfort zone?
You see, I don't know if it's a lesson, because it's a daily thing. And if you think, oh, I have to learn a lesson, no, it's a daily, you move every day. You just do what you have to do, So I think it's very instinctive, so I was multitasking. I had to build, design, work with contractors, impose my views, which was a difficult thing, because I go for very edited thing, and the culture here is ornate. And so I remember when I was designing the first house, I would leave sketches, go to Paris and come back, and the craftsman would tell me, oh, madame, we did even better than your sketches. And I would say, you know what? I'm not going to look at what you did, and I'm not going to pay you until you do exactly what I said, I don't even want to look at it. And I didn't want to look at it because I thought, if it's good and I accept, then they're never going to follow my sketches again. And I don't think I'm going to like it because I liked what I had sketched. But and after a while, there was a very strong discipline on the construction side because they knew they could not mess with me. I was not going to pay anything if it was not what I wanted. And it's always this constant fight on a construction site, especially here, because after the walls are up, there's a lot of finishing where you're dealing with craftsmen. You're not dealing with big companies, Big companies, they go by the drawings, by the millimeter. Here, the beauty of building in Morocco is that a lot of things are handmade. And because it's handmade, it can be changed, So, and I always had deadlines to finish because it was a business. It was not a leisure home. So I think that the lesson learned for me in terms of the process of building, never change your mind. Be extremely firm. There's only one captain on the boat, and it has to be you. That was for the building process. Now, for the operating process, it was also the same, but it was more difficult in a way when I realized it, because if it's a small business, you can run it like a small business. But when it started growing, I never took management classes, and there's some instinct that I didn't have, which if I had would have probably helped me a lot. So I recognize that I'm not a good manager, but my son, who came back here, he's here for the moment, but then he'll go to the US to do a PhD. So my kids left here when they were 13. We moved here when they were 3 and 5. And when they were 13, they went to boarding school in England, but it was not a punishment. We would see them a lot, and they would come back here a lot, and they loved it. So it was not at all a punishment. It was something fantastic. And after they went to McGill University in Canada.
Oh, so, yes. Yeah. Wonderful university.
Yeah, great university. And then our son after went to a school called SOAS in England. And he has experiences between works, but he's passionate about migrants and legal, and he's not going to be a lawyer, even though he would have been the best of all of us. He's passionate about migrant causes, and he's has created his own organization to assist migrants in terms of health and legal assistance. And so he's here. And even though he studied history, political science, and human geography and things like that, he has a very strong instinct about how to manage. And he has reorganized everything in a very sensible way. So I think that it's really there that I realized how weak I was on some aspects, and how lacking of the proper management skills had in fact hindered my business for not doing much better.
It's also a strength to be able to identify your weaknesses, though.
Yeah, but you see, for my I could identify it because he reorganized everything, and I could see all the things I never did, which were key, And after he's gone, there will be some, because after he's going back to the US, I'll have to hire someone, and he has put some controlling thing that he can control through computers. So he'll be able to control the management from wherever he is. And I will dedicate myself to designing and working on new projects, because I just don't like the daily management of the business. You can't do everything,
My last question, because this platform is one to inspire Black women. Most of my audience is in the divided states, as I call it, but it's to inspire Black women to step outside.
In the what?
I call the United States, the divided states.
Oh, yes, 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 yes.
But, this platform is to inspire Black women who live primarily in the United States, but all over the world, to step outside of their comfort zones and leave their home country and, thrive in other atmospheres. What advice do you have for Black women who have been thinking of becoming an expat?
Well, it will depend of the result of the election. I have friends who are not African American who are saying if the orange stain continues to trespass the White House, they're leaving.
Yes.
If this is the very unfortunate case where we continue to see the dismembering of democracy under our eyes, I think that first thing, Black business have to organize themselves if they can't.
Absolutely.
And yesterday I was reading about this guy who was saying to African Americans, if you just, the kind of money you put in your sneakers, if you just put it in a bank to open an account in a bank, in 1 week we could raise 100 million. And it would be a Black bank, and it would give credit to Black people, and it would help small businesses. Wow. And so I think that there's two ways for our sisters still trapped there. If they can leave, I would tell them, leave. If he is reelected, and I would say, I in quote, look, a friend of mine gives conferences at the MIT, and one of his students sent him this terrifying video that I will send you. For ballots received by mail, when you open, it's about
Donald Trump.
Yes. It's pages and pages of flyers. So if you're not interested, you think it's like an advertising and you throw it in the bin. And then at the end, under all this pile, there's the ballot. Now, how despicable and tricky is that? So some people are going to throw this in the bin and wait for the ballot, which will never come because it has already come. It doesn't come twice. So to our sisters, so those who, if Biden and Harris are in power, I think everyone should stay and help. Everyone should, but we still have to, but all the Trump voters will still be in the country trying to create problems. So I think that it is really important for all the Black businesses to become stronger and to start thinking about transmitting and creating wealth. We don't need to buy jewelry. We don't need to buy all of this stuff. It's much more important to invest into businesses, into real estate, into education, and transmit, all these values to our children, And so I think that there's going to be two options for all the sisters staying there. If he makes his way back to the White House, you have to fight peacefully, but to make sure that our people become stronger. And if you have no choice, you stay. If you have a choice, you leave. And if Biden and Harris are elected, then I think everybody should stay and help them make America good.
Great again.
Good again. Good again. Yeah.
I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting that particular piece of advice, but I appreciate that perspective. And so lastly, what is next for you, and where can people keep up with your journey on social media?
So I have two Instagrams. I'm not very active on Facebook. So I have Jnane Tamsna, which is Jnane, T like Thomas, A, M like mother, S, N, A. That's my hotel. And I have my own, which is Meryanne Inspired. And Meryanne is with an E, Meryanne.
Shout out to our Patreon members for your support. If you too are interested in joining the Black Broads Abroad movement, you can follow us on social media, and that's BLACKBROADS. That's on Instagram and Facebook. And if you'd like to become a supporter on Patreon, you can do so on patreon.com/Black Broads Abroad.